gonna go over with you guys what, in my opinion, what I say is the biggest feature needed in pretty much every single mode in NBA 2K22, and we're gonna find out if we get those right. So I'm gonna start off with my favorite mode in 2K, and pretty much still my favorite mode overall, but it's getting a close push from a mode I've been playing a lot lately, and I'll get into that a little bit later in the stream. But MyNBA, the biggest thing to me, like there's a lot of things in MyNBA that are really dope. There are way more things in it that are dope than that aren't. But there's some stuff that just doesn't work properly, and to me, it kind of messes with the overall immersion and the objective of the mode itself. And that's the injuries issues. They have to fix these injuries. They don't happen unless you're simming. There's no injuries at all, hardly, that will ever happen in an actual game. And that just is insane at this point. You cannot have a franchise mode with no injuries. You can't. It's pointless. You might as well be playing something else. And to kind of do it on a kind of cheap way, where the only time injuries happen is in simulated games, that's just crazy. That doesn't work. For me, fixing injuries, I mean, yes, player progression is a thing and the lack thereof, but fixing injuries to me is like the biggest thing. The next one is for my team. It's a tie, and there's a couple of them that are a tie for me, but they really need a salary cap mode and they need a draft mode really, really bad. At this point, every other collector mode has blown past them in the way of having those two options as a way to play their collector mode. For whatever reason, 2K is rebuffing the whole concept, right, of having a salary cap mode. I think it's better if you want to create a true competitive gaming platform for the mode, and if you want to have some level of order. I don't mean they should still have unlimited. Unlimited should still be a thing, but this should be a salary cap. Draft mode is probably, even them not having that is even less understandable. I guess maybe their thought is we won't have as much value on the great cards if we allow people to get them in a draft mode. I disagree with that totally. I hope that's not the case, or I hope that's not what they think, because it's not true at all. It just needs to be in the mode. But draft champions, or MUT, whatever they call it, MUT draft, and battle royal and Diamond Dynasty, those are all awesome, and 2K needs their version. Next, we got MyCareer. They need a story with a beginning and an end. So a lot of people didn't like Long Shot or The Journey or whatever, or some people didn't like it, but for 2K, because the grind of it is such a part of building your individual character. So the story mode and stuff is not as big a part of building your stuff in Madden and FIFA as it is, or hasn't been, as it is in 2K. For me, 2K's story mode, their whole MyCareer single player journey, should have a beginning and an end, and that's just it. And you play through it almost like a separate mode, and then there's all of these rewards and VC drops that come throughout the whole thing. There's certain badges that you can only earn by completing the story mode concept. Just keep that separate, but don't make me continue to have to play that way if I don't want to. Now, I'm not saying get rid of MyCareer altogether and don't have it where your single player plays NBA games, because there are people who like to play that way. But I don't think it makes any more sense to tie that in and make it a necessity for people who literally, some people who play Park and Pro-Am, and the only reason they play MyCareer is because it's how they grind their character. I think many of them would much rather grind their character in modes that they actually consider fun. Many of them don't even consider playing MyCareer fun at all. But there are people who do like MyCareer. So, and they don't even really necessarily need the story. They just like playing the games with their character in the NBA environment. I don't see why we can't have them all, but I just don't think that they all have to be linked as they are. If you have MyCareer as a story that begins, ends, you beat it, you finish it, that's it, it's done, for that time period, because I got another layer to this that I'm going to drop, then that makes all the sense in the world to me, because you get your VC, you get whatever badges, you get whatever rewards, whatever, you know, gear or whatever that would come from it, but it's over. And if you don't want to play that way anymore, you don't have to. I feel like Michael Jordan. Look, you don't want to play that way, then don't play that way. Right. But that's how it would be. And if you want to play MyCareer, just taking your character through an NBA season, you can do that too. But if you don't want to do any of that, and you just would rather grind your character on the park, or, you know, or at Pro-Am or whatever, then that's fine. It's your choice. Now, here's the other wrinkle I'm gonna add on the story mode. I feel like they should stretch it out where the story has chapters that is not all dropped at the very beginning, and the whole thing is not done at launch. So you got a beginning of the story that drops at launch. You play through that chapter. That chapter has a cliffhanger. The next segments don't come out for another 2 or 3 months, and you plan this drop to tell this entire story, which could have multiple characters. You could be playing as different people with different missions and different objectives and all of that, but it's really like a story mode that has DLC that drops throughout the entire cycle of 2K. That makes so much more sense, because one, it's storytelling, and it keeps people vested and interested and wanting to add, and so you have these different rewards, different VC bonuses for finishing. And obviously you're gonna have some people gonna blow through the story mode within the first 2-3 days that it comes out. That's cool, that's fine. People do that with single player games all the time, but this is a single player concept is what they're doing, but they're kind of melding it in and making it like it has to be a multiplayer thing or with a multiplayer connection. It shouldn't have to be. That should be your choice. If you just wanted to play through the story mode, and each chapter that drops maybe in 4 to 6 segments over the course of a 2K's life cycle, if that's all you wanted to do and you never want to go to Park, Pro-Am, or Rec or anything, that should be fine. You should be able to do that. If you don't want to play story mode at all, but you just want to take a character and go through an entire NBA season, you should be able to do that. Play it the way you want to play it. But that's my thing for MyCareer. That's probably the biggest part of it here, that for each of the modes. Next up, we got Pro-Am. To me, this is really easy. They need commissioner tools really bad. They need to be able to run their own leagues. The fact that, you know, WR, United Pro-Am, who just put on an amazing event, which is kind of linked up with all of the top Pro-Am leagues joining together. But the fact that they can't like go into 2K and run their own tournaments, go into 2K and run their own leagues with stat tracking and all of that sort of thing is crazy. It should be there. And it only would help the 2K league, because it would give a platform for which to create a for a large league that gets its own exposure, to use the game to create a feeder league for 2K. That's already what United Pro-Am and MPBA and WR had been anyway. Now you're just helping them, because it ultimately helps the game 2K itself, and then it helps the 2K league, which is a separate venture, but it still helps the overall branding of 2K. And I think that that's something that should happen. For Rec, this one is probably the most ambitious concept, but I do think there's a chance that this happens as early as this year. And I have reason to believe that, based off of things that I've learned, not just from 2K, but from other companies. It's called Teammate Finder. And this is my concept. So if 2K uses this, it won't be called that. I'm sure, because this is something that I'm dropping. But one of the biggest issues with Rec and stuff like that, and people show up and they got, you know, if you don't have a whole squad, you're trying to find somebody to play with, you don't have a great experience when you're playing, people don't pass you the ball, all kinds of stuff like that goes on, right? What I think would be a really help is that if you had a way to link up and a way to find missing pieces to a team that might ultimately become a Pro-Am team, but you have ways where you can, within the system, within the game itself, you can link up. So it's like a thumbs up system. And now you can choose to play with whomever you want, but it's giving you an idea of what type of experience you might have. And if you hold people to some level of of a standard, right? And you say, well, if this person gave you a positive gameplay experience, then give them a thumbs up. If they didn't, then they don't, right? So you can't give people an opportunity to give people a thumbs down, because people will just do that anyway. But thumbs up, they probably will only do that if they are happy with them. If they either don't think about it, or they are unhappy with them, they don't have any action at all to do it. It keeps down the unnecessary negativity. You're able to put in your position preference or what position you're playing. So if you go in and you're looking and you're trying to find somebody to play with, you're like, oh, I need a big man. Oh, we need a sharp. Oh, we need a lock. Oh, we need a point guard. Oh, we need whatever. This is there, as well as the person's thumbs up system or their thumbs up rating. And you see how often this person gets thumbs up based off the times that they're playing. You can even see what their average teammate grade is. This would do a lot to help you kind of have the experience that you want to have when you play rec. That's just my personal thing. I see we got comments building up. I'm going to check these after this particular question, but I do want to get through this particular one. And I told you guys, I kind of put in a lot of work to each one of these answers. Next up, we got Play Now Online, which is probably the most neglected of all of the modes. I think it's not a lot that you can do with Play Now Online, to be honest. You just want to make sure that it works properly. And the other thing is you want to have a leaderboard that makes sense. So I'm jumping to the end of this sentence when saying weighted rankings. If you have weighted rankings, and they somewhat have this now, but it doesn't give you the same type of point system that they really should have. If you have these different teams on tiers, and a lot of times these tiers are kind of broken in Play Now Online. You're like, why are they this tier? But if winning certain games, there's a formula for it. So if I win with a team that's on tier 3 and I beat a team on tier 1, and if we win by 5 points or less, then I get this amount of points. If we win by 10 points or less, or between 6 and 10 points, then I get this amount of points. If it's a blowout or this person quits, then I get this amount of points. I get the max amount of points to go on the leaderboard with whatever team that I'm playing on. And that to me starts to show people a little bit more of who actually is the best in Play Now Online. And it also encourages you to play with some lower tier teams, because you are able to better see how the rankings work. Right now, it's some semblance of that system, but not exactly. And I like the fact that you go up from freshman, varsity, and all of that sort of thing. I like that whole concept. But there's even more that could be there to further differentiate who are the better players there, and to add to that whole competitive environment. Tournaments themselves, I think, are fantastic. Setting up Play Now Online tournaments that are like once a month would give people an opportunity to kind of train and prepare for the games, train and prepare for the tournaments. You can pick whichever teams that you want to pick, but you will. Again, we go into the weighted system. So there's a whole situation where you deal with home court advantage and that sort of thing, but there's got to be a way to do tournaments with Play Now Online in a way that inspires people or encourages people to want to play. My next one is Park. I had mentioned this maybe about 2 years ago, and people crapped on it. But about a month ago, Chalk of the NBA 2K League kind of wondered aloud, and he said, wouldn't it be something if there was a way to play in 2K? I can't remember exactly what he said in the tweet, but he implied that, only greens went in. And that was something that I suggested a couple years ago. They could have a court. Maybe it's a weekend event or whatever, but a single court or an event where the only jump shots that go down are greens. If it's not a green, it doesn't go in. Now, obviously, I'm not saying every court. I'm saying, but if you go to this one particular greens only court, that would be the stipulations. I think that you would have a lot of people who would go there, but because they would consider that would make them elite as shooters if they go there and they have success. And I just think it's a nice theme, a nice variation, a way to play Park. Now, last but not least, we're going to talk about gameplay. Again, it's a tie, because I couldn't figure out which one of these things needed to be fixed the most. But stamina is, to me, probably the biggest problem in the game. This is the reason why dribbling can be overpowered. This is one of the reasons why playing defense in 2K is literally about running into your character to block their way, as opposed to simply cutting them off. Because the thing of it is if you had any level of a stamina concept, if I cut off the dribble once or twice on a guy that's trying to penetrate or trying to beat me off the dribble, 9 times out of 10, they're going to have to back up and reload. And that's a lot of energy, not to mention you got the shot clock situation. But this guy's already tried 2 explosive moves to beat me going left, right, or whatever he's tried to do. If possession by possession, that stamina dipped a bit, he'd have to pass that ball off, and we'd have a different look, and you wouldn't have people be able to essentially turbo their way to scores. Also, late in games, when a guy's been fouled a lot and he's blinking red, he's got a Gatorade cup, but it doesn't matter. They're still getting contact dunks left and right. There's very minimal effect that being tired has in 2K. And I'm not talking about Park, obviously, because that you shouldn't even have stamina in Park, except for possession by possession. But after the new possession is over, their stamina should be, completely replenished. It's a whole different kind of game. I'm talking about in an NBA style game, even in Pro-Am. Well, not even Pro-Am. Any game where substitutions are a part of it, the stamina needs to be fixed. Now we also got defensive and offensive AI. Right now, the AI is, well, at least in 2K21, I have no idea where guys are running, why they're running there. This is a legacy issue, actually. But I don't know, maybe in 2K21 it's worse, or maybe I just played so much of it because of Umba. I really just soaked in. I have no idea what's happening with the cuts most of the time, especially in freelance. They're leaving wide open shots in the corner, cutting right into 2 defenders, not vacating spaces when, obvious basketball knowledge would tell you to vacate a space. And then in defensive AI, bigs are still allowing guys to run completely past them for easy dunks because their man is above the 3-point line. Never mind, he's a 7'1" guy who's not a 3-point shooter at all. In transition, they're letting guys run behind them and not prioritizing protecting the rim. That's just an example of what I'm talking about. That's not the end all be all of it. There are some other AI issues, but on both sides of the ball, AI has some issues.